these cartels for? Are we supposed to sing it too?
Yeah, you can sing if you want to. It's up to you. Whatever you wish.
We'll sing something. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Ashtaksharesha Tarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Sri Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Paribhat Kachai Stitira Sata Sri Srimad Chidandi Goswami Shile Si Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Paribhat Kachai Stitira Sata Sri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrindi ki jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasri Gaura Bhakti Vrindi ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gominath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai, Ganga Mayi ki jai, Jamuna Mayi ki jai, Tulsi Maharani ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru. And Shri Gauranga, glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. So we've been requested, my wife and I, to come here and speak a little bit about our interactions, our memories of the times that we were blessed and graced with the opportunity to be in the presence, the physical presence of Srila Prabhupada. You are also always in the presence of Srila Prabhupada. But we, due to uncalculable and undeserved fortune, we're able to physically be present on different occasions when His divine grace was where we were. So first of all, my name is, or the name that Srila Prabhupada has given me, I should say, is Pancharatna Dasa. And I received that name in 1971 in New York City. And we'll talk more about what happened after that. But first, let my good wife introduce herself.
And I'm originally from Australia, and I got initiated then in 1976 by Shri Prabhupada.
Krishna. So that's better. And plus it has the, whatever that can. So, his name was Neil. And he just went at those tapes like a mile a minute. So fast forward a few months, this is about 1969. I'm a student at Antioch College, where he is from. And after his experience at 26 Second Avenue, he decides to hold his own kirtans and love feasts at Antioch College. And that was my first exposure to the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So I kind of consider that to be my first indirect, but through Neil, I had some connection with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, during his presence here, had this extraordinary ability to touch just one person that would then touch another and touch another. Of course, the most striking example is Russia, where just one devotee, Ananta Shanti, spread Krishna consciousness all over Russia through just one meeting with Srila Prabhupada. Mukunda Maharaj's story is similar, that you have Srila Prabhupada, as in 26 Second, how many have read his miracle on 2nd Avenue? Highly recommended. So he had nurtured, you'll read everything there. He had nurtured a desire to go to India with his wife. Now they're Mukunda and Janaki. And in that plan, they decided to first go to San Francisco and meet up with some of their friends there and arrange things to go off to the Holy India. And just with a few words, Srila Prabhupada said, "Oh, you're going to San Francisco. Why don't you open a center there?" 5 words, perhaps. Why don't you open a center there? From those few words, the entire San Francisco explosion took place. So Srila Prabhupada has this power with a few words, even with a glance, to spread Krishna consciousness. So that was an indirect connection. I wouldn't have a direct connection until I was initiated. 1971. I had joined our movement about 7-8 months earlier in Toronto, Canada. Again, that was Krishna's mercy. I was there for various reasons, and just happened to obtain accommodation on the same street as the temple, and would pass by the ISKCON Center on my way to some work that I had. At the time, I had my own spiritual concepts and ideas, even a mantra connected to Jesus. And I actually intended to preach to the devotees there about my spiritual experiences. But it happened the other way, and I got connected. When people ask, when did you meet Srila Prabhupada first, I generally respond that I met him first in his books, because I felt like that. When people ask, why did I join the movement, my response is that I saw 3 things. First was the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. They taught me the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. As I said, I had my own concocted mantra. I went to a park and I sat down and I chanted my concocted mantra of Jesus and so on. And then I chanted Hare Krishna. And I experienced something that I didn't expect. I felt some spiritual awakening in me. So I said, no, there is something here. There's something powerful. So that was one. Secondly, is I had already developed a concept that from my interaction with Jesus and the Bible and so on, that the purpose of life was to serve God. But I had very little idea of God and very little idea of service. And when I saw the lifestyle of the devotees, how they were engaged in service in every hour and minute and aspect of it, from eating to sleeping to everything was engaged in service, then that convinced me. And then I read Srila Prabhupada's words. And I got the impression, I felt this person knows God. Actually knows God. So these three factors compelled me, or impelled me, I should say, to move in 2 weeks. And so I was a brahmachari in the Toronto temple. Couldn't stay in Canada, being a U.S. citizen. There was some complications, ended up in Buffalo. And then 8 months later, I'm being allowed to come to New York. Srila Prabhupada at the time had stopped initiating for about 6 or 7 months. He had, I think it was late 69. I'm not sure. I need to go back and check the timeline. But he had suffered, as you know, he suffered a stroke and some heart condition in New York City. Somehow recovered, but was not in good health, and finally decided to go back to India. And as you will read, or you have read in his biographies, the devotees were completely devastated, not knowing whether he would, because he said, I don't know whether I will return or not. So at some point he actually stopped initiating, because he wasn't there, first of all, and the process of letters and so on hadn't really developed. But then he comes back triumphantly with vigor. And there's this backlog of devotees waiting for initiation, to be accepted as his disciple. And he first does initiations in Boston, then comes to New York City. And devotees are appearing from all over. I was, at the time, doing some service in Washington, D.C. I hadn't yet relocated to New York, so I came up with another group of devotees there. And as I said, this was this period of one after another. I think it was 6 days of initiations. Different groups from different places. I guess it was the day before, we were sent off to get our beads. Now, those days, there was not a lot of stock of Tulsi Mala and so on from Vrindavan. In fact, we had to go down to a section of New York where they sold wooden beads and buy a bag of beads. I bought some white ones, get some string, and then we spent our time, making our beads. That was our system. So I made my beads and gave them in. And then the next day came up for initiation. Now, this will relate also to my wife's stories about her initiation, because in my case, the secretary, this was the system, and it eventually evolved, as I was saying, into mail and into people being initiated through the mail, the beads being chanted on by sannyasis and so on, but this was still early days. But still, the secretary, Sanskrit editor, in fact, Pradumya, had been given the task of selecting names. And in my day, it seemed like he was decided for some reason to do number names. So there was Ashtarath and Dasarath and Saptarath and Navarath, and then I came up and I was Pancharatna. So Prabhupada, I came up, of course, I was asked about the regulative principles, chanting 16 rounds. And so my first interaction was, your name is Pancharatna Das. Five jewels. Okay, Hare Krishna. Later I went, because that's all I know, 5 jewels. What are these 5 jewels? What is this? I'd never... And I asked Pradumya, and he said, well, some king or something. He actually didn't know either. There are many stories like this. How many of you have heard of Hansaduta's story about his name? Hansaduta relates how when he was initiated, his legal name is Hans Keri, right? Hans Kari. And he never liked his name. He tells this story. He never liked his name, Hans. He didn't like it. So he thought, I'm gonna get a new name. I'll get a new name. Right? And he was thinking various names. I don't know, he tells his story. And I also, I don't know if you did. I was thinking, I had chosen my name. You know, many of Datri, maybe you also did that. We would think about, well, maybe what would my name? And some devotees actually did really get the name that was just like perfect. I was thinking because Stephen, my legal name was Stephen, so something beginning with S, and Sanatan or something like that. Anyway, Pancharatna. Hansaduta remembers that he gets up and your name is Hansaduta. And he said, oh, Hans, I'm still Hans. And then, of course, he knows, what does it mean? What's it mean? And he goes, and at some point, he relates how he went to ask Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada says, look in the Puranas, or something like that. The Purana, where am I? Some years later, he relates how some years later, Srila Prabhupada is talking with the devotees and telling and talking about their names, and this name means this, and this name means that, and so on. And then then Hansaduta is thinking, finally, I'm going to know what my name means, right? And then but he doesn't say anything, and then Hansaduta asks, so what is Hansaduta? Who is Hansaduta? And Prabhupada says, you are Hansaduta. So anyway, Pancharatna, I still don't really know. I know there are 5 jewels: diamonds, emeralds, sapphires, ruby, and pearl. Right? Those are the Pancharatna. There's some Pancharatna Giti, something like that. Anyhow, is it okay that I keep going, or do you want to say some things and then I'll say some things? What would you like? What would you like?
Maybe I could.
Why don't you say something? Okay. Since we're on the subject of names and initiations, then you can tell your story. So we're going to have a tag team here, and my wife is going to tell her initiation story, okay?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. I just wanted to start off by saying when I first met the devotees. So Srila Prabhupada would get 2 devotees to go here and there all over the world. So he got 2 devotees to go, in 1970 to go to Sydney, Australia and open up a center. So he got Bali Madan and Upendra, and they were very vastly different people. Upendra was all sort of smiley and he would dance, you know, all his steps were like dance movements, and Bali Madan was very serious. So I went to a place in Sydney. Every Sunday there was people who would go to this big park called the Domain, and they would stand on soapboxes. They do the same in Hyde Park in England as well. So I was going to Sydney University at the time, and one of my friends had given me a Bhagavad Gita, a Penguin Bhagavad Gita, and for some reason I happened to be carrying that. And I met these 2 very strange-looking men in saffron with shaved heads. No one would ever shave their heads then. This was in 1970. So we were chanting and dancing, and then after that we'd go up some stairs and go to the house that they were staying in. And they were showing me a magazine, and they were saying, "Oh, this is God," and they would point to a little blue boy, and I'm from a Christian background. I'm like, God's a little blue boy, and he eats yogurt and steals butter from his mother? That was a bit hard to comprehend after a Christian background. I actually, at that time, I didn't know you could join, because probably I would have joined then, but I didn't know. Anyway, through the years I would go to different temples all around Sydney, and then I was staying in a house in Sydney with some people from New Zealand, okay? And eventually I went over to New Zealand, and one day I was walking along and I saw one of my friends, and she was in a sari and she was chanting and dancing, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, I'm a Hare Krishna now, and why don't you come to the temple, and here's the address." And I figured out I lived 2 blocks from there, so I would go every day. So I was going and looking at the deities and talking to the devotees and everything, and I was thinking, "Oh, I'll join." But what happened with those devotees, they were very influenced by a devotee in Hawaii, and he said, "Oh, you don't need to join the temple. You just chant Hare Krishna and you can live outside the temple." So anyway, that was in 1973, and actually I did join for a couple of weeks in 1973. Some devotees came over from Australia and continued on with the deity worship like that. And so I joined in 73, and after a couple of weeks, somehow or other, I left, and then I joined again in 1975, and it was so nice, I joined twice. So anyway, there was a brahmachari who was a temple president. I really looked up to him a lot. He was very intelligent, and he could explain the philosophy very well. But one evening, he just got very angry. We didn't know why he got angry. He got angry, and then he said, all the ladies have to leave the temple. And we didn't know what to do. It was 9 o'clock at night. We were just about to take rest, and he said, no, you get out, or I'm calling the police. So anyway, we left, and I actually did know people who lived up the road, so we stayed there for a while. And he said, oh, you can work at Spiritual Sky and then go over to Melbourne. So we did that, and we went to Melbourne. There was about 3 or 4 brahmacharinis, and we all went to Melbourne. Anyway, I really looked up to this temple president, and what he was doing was he was talking about spiritual desires. He was saying, if you have a real spiritual desire, it will be fulfilled. And I thought, I'm going to test this. So I figured out, okay, this is my spiritual desire. My spiritual desire is that I personally want to be initiated by Srila Prabhupada. Now, the brahmacharis in New Zealand got initiated, and it was all by letter. And it was 1976 at this time, April 76. And what happened is that we never really knew if Prabhupada was going to come or not. And Australia's like all the way over on the other side of the world, you know, from London and New York. But anyway, Srila Prabhupada did come. It was April 1976. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada was coming, and one of the householders said to me, I don't want you to go to the airport to see Srila Prabhupada. The highest service is actually service in separation. So what I want you to do is I want you to make chandan paste, and then you can personally put it on Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so I thought about it, and I was like, I was feeling too anxious. I really wanted to go and see Srila Prabhupada as early as possible. So I said to the person who said, why don't you make the sandalwood paste? I said to him, why don't you make it? If it's such good service in separation, why don't you make the chandan paste? Okay, so then we both got into the car and went to the airport. So there was 4 doors at the airport that Srila Prabhupada could come out of. He'd been in Australia 3 times. So the first door, the second door, and the third door, he'd been in all of them. So we stood around the 4th door, and we were chanting and dancing. In those days, the devotees completely took over the airports when they were there. Everybody knew that the devotees were there. We were always chanting and dancing and giving out flowers and being ecstatic. And anyway, so we thought, oh, he'll come out of this door. And of course, the spiritual master can do whatever he likes. So he came out of another door. And then we all paid obeisances. In those days, the ladies would pay full dandavats. And we looked up, and we could hardly believe it. He was this shining, effulgent, golden person walking about 12 inches above the ground. It was absolutely incredible. So Srila Prabhupada talked to the press, and he gave class. In those days, most of the initiates were initiated by male. And my spiritual desire was I wanted to be personally initiated by Srila Prabhupada. So, there was a little girl there, about 4 years old, and we used to sort of hang out together and go and take darshan and talk together and things like that. So when it was time to get initiated, she grabbed hold of my hand and she said, Mataji, I'm going up to get initiated too. I said, well, okay. So we went up to see Srila Prabhupada, and again we paid dandavats. And then this little girl went up to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, does that mean I'm initiated now? And Srila Prabhupada said no, and she was really forlorn. So Guru Kripa was the GBC then, and he pacified her by giving her a rose. Okay? So then, in those days, the secretary would give the names. So Srila Prabhupada read out my name, Bhaktin Louise. Oh, you can be Anita. And then he said, no, you can't. You can't be Anita. Anita is not a devotee name. Anita means without a path. And we devotees, we have a path. So I'm going to call you Atita Guna Devi Dasi. And then I realized my spiritual desire was fulfilled. I was personally initiated with a new name by Srila Prabhupada. Yeah. So this little girl, Shani, she was wearing a light pink sari. And Srila Prabhupada was asking me questions like, is she your daughter? And asking quite a few questions from me, and I was so petrified, I just gave a yes or no answer. And then that evening, there was darshan. Srila Prabhupada gave darshan. So one lady went up to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, I would like you to give my daughter a name. And Srila Prabhupada said, okay, let's call her Pushpa. And Pushpa means flower, okay? And so this little girl's mother went up and said, Srila Prabhupada, can you please name my daughter? And everyone was, with bated breath, was like, oh, I wonder what the name will be. And then Srila Prabhupada said, let's call her Rose. And everyone was like, Rose? That's not a Sanskrit name. And then I was figuring out, what's a Sanskrit name? The Sanskrit name is Gulab. So I thought, this beautiful little girl going around, with a name like Gulab. So Srila Prabhupada called her Rose. Anyway, after Srila Prabhupada asked if Rose was my daughter, I realized I was going to have daughters. He could see that in me. Next day, we were able to go to the botanical gardens. The botanical gardens in Melbourne are really beautiful, like probably one of the most beautiful botanical gardens in the world. And then every tree had a Latin name on it, and every flower, every plant had a Latin name and that sort of thing. And anyway, we went to the botanical gardens, and the ladies were behind. They were walking behind, and we couldn't really hear Srila Prabhupada. But the very intelligent ladies, every time Srila Prabhupada would step on a leaf, they would pick it up, and they would treasure that for the rest of their life, that their spiritual master put his foot on that particular leaf. So one girl, she was a book distributor, grabbed me by the hand and said, no, we're going down to the front. So we went down to the front, Now, Srila Prabhupada was a very friendly person. So any joggers or anyone like that, he would say, Haribol, how are you? Good morning, and that sort of thing. So anyway, he stopped by a tree, and he grabbed the leaves from the tree and started smushing them, and then he smelt it, and he said, what kind of tree is this? And one of the devotees who read the sign said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, that's a camphor tree. And Srila Prabhupada said, ah, that's Radharani's favorite fragrance. And then a devotee came up to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, I have a question. We're always told, like almost daily, we're told, being in the temple is like Vaikuntha. And Vaikuntha means without anxiety. But I find that I'm always in anxiety. And then Srila Prabhupada said, yes, to be in a human form of life is to be in anxiety. We get to pick what sort of anxiety. Are you in spiritual anxiety or material anxiety? You figure it out. And he said, if you're not in anxiety, you are jombi. Jombi, which is Bengali for zombie, meaning the walking dead. So, that afternoon, when I went back to the temple, one of the ladies said, oh, I want you to wash Srila Prabhupada's cloth. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm going to do the best that I can. So Srila Prabhupada had beautiful silk kurta and dhoti, and I thought, I'm going to make it the best possible. So I was a Pujari assistant at that time to Korma Prabhu, and I took the sandalwood oil, and I put the sandalwood oil in the water, the hot, soapy water. So I washed Srila Prabhupada's cloth as best as I could in the hot, soapy water. I rinsed it. I put it as best as I could. I put it on the line. It dried, and I started ironing it. And when I started ironing it, I realized, oh, there's big sandalwood blobs of oil on Srila Prabhupada's kurta and dhoti. What am I going to do? So I thought, in those days, about 80% were brahmacharis and brahmacharinis, and 20% were grihastas. And then actually, Srila Prabhupada said to us, very soon it's going to be the other way round. There's going to be 20% grihastas and 20% brahmacharis and 80% grihastas. And we're like, we believe everything Srila Prabhupada said, but we can't believe that. No, it's brahmacharis and brahmacharinis. That's what it's all about. So then, I had an old school friend there, and she had a husband from Sri Lanka. I think he's, where are they from? Tamil? Is it Tamil? Yeah, I think he was from the Tamil community. So she wanted to know what his culture was like. So she would come, and I was her old school friend from 6th grade, and she talked a lot to Srila Prabhupada. And in the end, she gave him a golden necklace. She gave it to him. And then I was, at the Sunday feast, I was sitting with her, and Hari Sori came up and said, Srila Prabhupada wants to know if he can give the golden necklace to, real golden necklace to Radharani? And she said, yeah. And then I said to him, Hari Sori Prabhu, is it all right if we touch Srila Prabhupada's feet? And he said, yeah, you're initiated, you can do that. So,
Did you ask her for the money for the solution? Was she the person who gave you money for the solution?
no. I went to the Grihasta house with Korma and different other devotees and begged for money for the solution to get rid of the oil. Thank you. To get rid of the oil, to get rid of the oil deposits on Srila Prabhupada's cloth. So I completely drenched all his cloth with this solution, and I washed it in hot soapy water, rinsed it. There wasn't time to hang it out to dry, so I ironed it dry, and then what did I find? Big blobs of oil. And I'm like, what can I do? I have to give it to Srila Prabhupada. He needs it for tomorrow. And then I realized, oh, this morning he was talking about anxiety, and here I am in spiritual anxiety, wondering what I'm going to do with my spiritual master's cloth. I wanted it to be the best possible. I wanted it to be the cleanest and most perfect. So anyway, so I went to Hari Sori with the cloth and I said, I'm sorry, there's oil all over the cloth. What am I going to do? I couldn't do anything about it. And he said, oh, there's always oil on Prabhupada's cloth. When he gets massaged, there's oil on his cloth, so don't worry about it. Every 2 weeks, I do something, and the oil comes out of the cloth. And then I realized, oh, I'm actually ecstatic to be in spiritual anxiety like that, and not, you know, and it being all right with Srila Prabhupada. So, as I was a Pujari assistant, I had this wonderful service. And the wonderful service was I got to clean Srila Prabhupada's plate. So I had 17 best friends, just like that, because everyone wanted some of Srila Prabhupada's remnants. So I had 17 plates for my friends. Then Guru Kripa was the GBC then, and he came in and he said, no, 5 plates. 1 for the brahmacharis, 1 for the brahmacharinis, 1 for the grihastas, 1 for the sannyasis, and 1 for me. So what I did was I kept some for myself. I kept the nuts. He liked roasted nuts. So I had a jar, and all the nuts I would put in the jar. And every day I would have one. So then we were going to the airport, and actually the temple in Melbourne was a very nice temple with a courtyard in the center, and in the center there was roses and different flowers growing. So all the ladies would pick flowers and make posies, and we were going to go and see Srila Prabhupada off. He'd been there about 3 days. We were going to see Srila Prabhupada off at the airport. So we all went to the airport, and we offered the posies, and I offered mine. And like I said, in those days, you offered something to Srila Prabhupada, you paid your obeisances, and then I looked up, and there were his feet. So I didn't even think twice. I grabbed hold of his feet, and then I thought, my human life, this is the ultimate in my human life. I'm able to touch my spiritual master's feet. So it was there, and it seemed like ages. It was, you know, I just wouldn't let them go, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I've got service to do. He's got service to do, so I better let go of his feet. But all the time, I like on a daily basis, I want to think that I'm touching hold of Srila Prabhupada's feet. So that was the Melbourne pastimes, and could I talk about Mayapur?
Yeah.
So if you, after Srila Prabhupada left and he was saying things in the darshan, like, if you really want to please me, distribute my books. So I became a book distributor. So first of all, they said, you can't be a book distributor, you're too spaced out. Yeah, you know, all you can do is be a pujari assistant. No, you know, you can't sell books. And then I started doing it. I was allowed to do it 2 hours a day. And then one of the Mataji said, if you do that in 2 hours, in 6 hours you'll do that. And that's what I'm doing. So you can be a full-time book distributor. So that's what I ended up doing, being a full-time book distributor. And the book distributors were able to go to Mayapur. Srila Prabhupada wanted the book distributors to go to Mayapur to get fired up for the rest of the year. So we went to Mayapur, and in those days, Srila Prabhupada, this was February, March 1977, and Srila Prabhupada was quite weak. So he would go in a palanquin. 4 devotees would take him, and he'd go in a palanquin. So that night, there was a drama, and it was called The Age of Kali. So there was a big stage, and the actors were playing The Age of Kali, which happened to be one of Srila Prabhupada's favorites. But guess what? No one was looking at the play. Everyone was looking at Prabhupada. So we're all looking at Prabhupada. He was on the side. We were all looking at Prabhupada. And if he laughed or showed any kind of expression, then immediately as one person, we would look to see what he was laughing at or smiling at or something like that. So that was really nice. That was in front of the temple in Mayapur. And then a couple of days after that, we were told, the ladies were told, oh, you can go up and see Srila Prabhupada for 2 minutes. 2 ladies for 2 minutes, okay? So before I got to India, I asked one of the ladies, could I get something extra to Srila Prabhupada? Because Australia is actually the land of ghee. You got ghee everywhere, on all the grocery shelves and everything, you got ghee. So the Australian devotees would take 2 kilos of ghee each and present them to Srila Prabhupada. But I said to one lady, you've been there before, what can I take to Srila Prabhupada? And she said, take some full cream powdered milk. And I'm like, what? Full cream powdered milk, you get that anywhere in Australia. I don't think much of that as a gift. Okay, but I'll do it, because you know, and I'll do it. So here we were 2 ladies, you know, 2 and 2 and 2 and 2. So it got to be our turn, and it was in Srila Prabhupada's darshan room in Mayapur. So we went and we presented the ghee, and Prabhupada liked it very much. And then I was really embarrassed to give the full cream powdered milk. By that time, by the way, there was a big dent in it. And I was like, how can I give this to my spiritual master? But I was told by an older devotee, present this to Srila Prabhupada. So I presented it. I was incredibly embarrassed, but I presented it to Srila Prabhupada, and he looked at it, and all of a sudden, his eyes lit up, and he said, I tell my cooks to make all my sweets out of this full cream powdered milk. And then he started talking about cows, protection of cows, and how wonderful milk was. And then I realized, I pleased my spiritual master like that, now my human form of existence is worthwhile. So that's all I have to say. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
So since we left in Mayapur just now, I'll fast forward to Mayapur as well. After that. So as I said, I was initiated in New York City, and I became one of the members of the temple there, and I had so many different services. And my first visit to India was in 1975, but I didn't actually get much opportunity then. I was to see Srila Prabhupada because we had just, well, not just then, but we were attempting to relocate the temple, and I had lots of service in Mayapur, in New York City. So the arrangement was that I would come for a few weeks before the main group from New York would come, and then so that I could go back and kind of hold the fort while they were in India. So in 1976, I did the same thing. I came early, and I arrived in Mayapur, and within a short time, the temple commander approached me and says, well, we really are short-handed here. We really need help. Could you please help us out preparing for the festival? People are coming and we need help. So, okay. And within a few weeks, I was loaded up like this with all kinds of service in Mayapur. So the devotees come, and the New York temple crew has come. And by this time, I'm involved in the management now of Mayapur. And I had happened to meet two of the devotees who were responsible for Mayapur, Gargamuni and Bhavananda, in New York prior to that. We had just, by the way, in 1975, we had acquired 340 West 55th Street, the 13-story building, and I'd been moving everyone in and doing all kinds of service there. But just before coming to India, our temple president decided that it was time for him to make a switch. He joined the Radha Damodar party and left me doing the management until a new arrangement could be made. And at this time, Madhuvisa, who had been the GBC in Australia, was now going to come and be the GBC and temple president of New York. Which gives you an idea of the importance of New York. So Madhuvisa shows up, and Bhavananda, Gargamuni, they say, hey, we need help here. And the word had been around in America that Srila Prabhupada wanted devotees to come and take more responsibility in India. So I had sort of in my mind that idea, maybe, I could be selected for that and I'd get more opportunity to be with Srila Prabhupada. So Madhuvisa responded that, well, I'm new, I need to ask Srila Prabhupada. So he took me and we went to Srila Prabhupada. And none of this is recorded, so you'll have to take my word for it. And I have to say that I feel very fortunate that these memories that I'm relating to you, I related in 1979 to the devotees assisting Satsarup Maharaj in the Lilamrita, and they were recorded and transcribed, and I have the transcription of that. So it's not just now memory, it's what I remembered then. So I have some confidence, I should say, that this happened. So we entered Srila Prabhupada's room, and the details I can't remember, but he appeared quite pensive, and as I recall, there must have been some, as usual in India, some sort of politics or something that was a sign of the degradation of India as it is, the degradation of the world. And he made his first comment, which has stuck with me since then. And he said, we can't expect the whole world to become Krishna conscious. But there should be one ideal place. And with his gesture and his look and his tone, I took him to be meaning the Sri Mayapur project. The development of Sri Mayapur. That Sri Mayapur should become an ideal place that people all over the world could see Krishna consciousness being practiced in every sphere of life. So that sort of set the mood, and then Madhavisa began. And he began by saying, Srila Prabhupada, we understand that Mayapur is your most important project. And then Srila Prabhupada stopped him and said, no, New York is my most important project. Okay, now what? He's about to ask whether I should stay and leave New York and become part of the Mayapur project. Those words, of course, have also stuck with me, and for that reason, my wife and I now spend 6 months of the year in New York City and 6 months in Mayapur, because we have tried to balance it out, because ultimately it went on that Madhavisa kind of stumbled forward saying, well, okay, Bhavananda, they're asking, and Srila Prabhupada agreed. I suppose that he also understood the need, which was ultimately acknowledged later on. I became part of the team, and still, though, during the festival, we had augmented the team in Mayapur by the Namahata. Guru Kripa's party was there, and they did all kinds of service, but then they left, and we were back to a very small number. Srila Prabhupada told Jai Pataka to go to Vrindavan, because those days the festival meant the devotees would come to Mayapur, and then they'd observe Gaur Purnima, and then they would come here to Vrindavan, and they would have parikrama and go back to wherever they were going. So Srila Prabhupada said, go to Vrindavan and make an announcement that anyone who would like to stay and serve in India is free to do so without the permission of their temple president. Okay? Because then that was a big thing. You couldn't go anywhere in those days without permission of your temple president. And in fact, the temple president used to trade people. My wife was traded with another devotee in New York. That devotee was, the temple presidents worked it out, okay. I did this too, I will admit. In the New York temple, many of you have heard of the Radha Damodar party and Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So he used to, and the Radha Damodar used to land up in temples and not bother talking to the temple presidents, but just the next morning, just secretly invite the brahmacharis to just hop on the bus before Mangalarti, and then poof, they're off. So, so to prevent that, Tamal Krishna and I negotiated. Okay, you have someone, and I got someone. Let's trade. So we made a few trades, and that way we survived. So in any case, Jayapataka returned from Vrindavan with 20 new devotees to join the Mayapur project. So that is my a special Mayapur katha. But I'm going to go back, since we have a few more minutes, to my most memorable first experience with Srila Prabhupada. So this was in 1970, as I said, 71 was very brief because I was initiated, Srila Prabhupada initiated and I didn't stay in New York at that time. I went back to Washington and I only came to live in New York in the temple there maybe 3-4 weeks later, and Prabhupada had already left. But the next time that he came, 1972, I had an idea, because my service was communications and dealing with the media and assisting Rupanuga, who was the president at the time, in college outreach, etc. And somehow I got the idea, let's make television shows, because there was a system of those days called public television, public access television. Anyone could produce a show and submit it, and it would go out on, because cable television had become the new thing. There was this public access. Anyone could produce something. So I said, we'll make shows. My mother was really generous and gave me the money to buy video equipment. And I bought this portable video system that I could actually carry around. So Srila Prabhupada came in 1972, and I set up like this. I set up with my camera, and I made the first black and white videos of Srila Prabhupada. Some of you may have seen these. They're in the Acharya series, etc. The particular one that I am going to speak about, I think it got lost. But anyway, I'm sitting there with the camera, and it's such a great experience because it's silent. And those of you who read some of the stories know that Srila Prabhupada got often annoyed by the click, 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 click of the cameras when he was speaking. Bhargava Prabhu relates a number of times, in fact one time, that he practically was ready to commit suicide because Prabhupada was so upset with his click, click, click. Anyway, the videotape was it was just tape, like a recorder, and here I am, silent, so I could just sit there, and I was zooming in and out and trying to catch the nuances of his eyes and his hands and so on. So at the end of his talk, Srila Prabhupada, a kirtan happened. Now this was Srila Prabhupada's program generally in those days. He would chant Jaya Radha Madhava in the beginning, but after speaking, he would call for another kirtan. So there would be kirtan in the beginning and there would be kirtan at the end. So in this particular case, one devotee, I don't remember who, began doing kirtan. And this kirtan was going on. And at one point, Srila Prabhupada, he was playing his gong or something, and he takes over. He takes over the kirtan, leading the kirtan, which he would do on occasion. So he's leading this kirtan, and Srila Prabhupada's leading the kirtan. The devotees are ecstatic. And I'm taping. I'm behind my camera, and I'm trying to catch all of this. So then, afterwards, I requested and was given permission to come and show Srila Prabhupada. This is the new technology that we're using in your service. So I went to his room. The desk from that room is still in our New York City temple. You can go and see it. And I made arrangements. I set up a television set. I set everything up, and Prabhupada came in, and I began playing it. And he listened, and he listened. And then it came to the point, I don't know, I mean, perhaps I think I fast-forwarded it, I'm not sure, but it came to the point of his kirtan. And as he's watching himself leading the kirtan, he begins to clap along and chant, as, you know. And I had this distinct feeling that he's not like you or I might be looking at, oh, there I am, you know, I'm doing this, you know, here I am on television. No, the impression I got, he was simply absorbed in the holy names. That was his mood. He was simply absorbed in the holy names. That has lasted with me, that impression. And it's been reinforced by other people's memories. One that we just got this memory from, we were at 26 2nd Avenue for a I was invited. Those of you who have visited New York may know that we have a lease now. We want to, anyway, that's another story. For the original 26 2nd Avenue, and every Saturday there's a program, and I went there to do a Bhagavad Gita class. And I came a little early, and it was locked. And one young lady shows up, not so young, but anyway, she shows up and says, well, and she lives there. And so she lets us in and said, sometimes they're in the back, you can. But anyway, we strike up a conversation and invite her to come. She lives in the 26 2nd Avenue. She comes from time to time. And she knew the devotees, and she showed up for the program. And later we got to talk, and she related how when she was because she was a native of that area, how as a child she remembers driving with her father down the Bowery. Now, the Bowery, is those of you who remember, is the place that Srila Prabhupada resided on. He came there, he began his foothold, his real foothold in New York City took shape on the Bowery. Now, today you visit the Bowery, you think, oh, this is a nice area of New York. But when I lived in New York in 1971 and later on, the Bowery was the place, just a few diversions here. So in those days, we were really concerned about not wasting prasadam. So I was the temple commander. And so I used to try to get the devotees. We would save all the leftovers from the Sunday feast. We would take it and we would put it in a pot. And I tried to get the devotees to eat it, but they said no. This is, you know, who knows what this is. But what are we going to do with this? So it's 1 or 2 days later, and by this time it's kind of fermenting and so on. So we take it down to the Bowery. And the Bowery is people who are basically drunkards. I mean, there's a lot of drunkards who hang out on the Bowery. Otherwise, it's industrial area selling kitchen equipment. But people who live there were mostly down and out. We call them winos. And they loved it. They loved the fermented leftovers from our Sunday feast. So that was the Bowery. That was Prabhupada where he was living. He would have to step over drunken people sitting in their vomit. Anyway, this lady remembers driving down that street and out of there looking towards the sidewalk. And there's this man walking on the sidewalk in orange robes, elderly man, and he's playing cymbals. He's playing on cymbals and singing. There's no one there. It's not like he's got a kirtan party. He's just doing it himself. Another memory that of Srila Prabhupada's attachment to the Sankirtan comes from another resident of Vrindavan who remembers how Srila Prabhupada would go to the other side of the Jamuna when he was living in, not in Radha Damodar, but prior to that. Can't remember the name of that temple. He would go with his kartals, and he would go just to the other side of the Jamuna, take his danda and put it in the sand, and just do kirtan around his danda. Prabhupada was so filled with the holy names of Krishna. And it's my belief that he appeared to be alone, but that he wasn't. Narada Muni might have been there. Nityananda might have been there. But that was Srila Prabhupada. So that's my first memory, and one of my favorite memories is observing Srila Prabhupada's interaction with his own video, his own kirtan, but not in the mood of, that's me, but in the mood of, this is the holy names of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.